Londra la fermata di Person Green, ordigno rudimentale in un vagone, passeggeri feriti al volto. La Corea del Nord spara un nuovo missile che sorvola il Giappone, il lancio vicino a Pyongyang è passato sull'isola di Kaido. Poteva colpire la base americana di Guam, appello di Abe Uniti contro la minaccia, riunione di emergenza del Consiglio di sicurezza ONU. Ragazza uccisa nel Salento, verifiche sui PM per la mancata tutela della minore. Lunedì l'autopsia sul corpo della ragazza. Scatta l'ora X per quasi 600 parlamentari di prima nomina che oggi maturano il diritto alla Europa League. Buona la prima PDB, Formula 1 al via le libere di Singapore. Un minuto dopo le 11, benvenuti in una nuova edizione Sky TG24 dedicata a quello che sta accadendo in questo momento a Londra. Un'esplosione questa mattina alle 8:20 e Person Green, questa è la Liliana Faccioli Pintozzi.
Buongiorno, allora gli ultimi aggiornamenti arrivano da Downing Street dove Theresa May viene regolarmente aggiornata su quanto accaduto a Parsons Green, dove come dicevi è arrivata anche l'antiterrorismo. Non ci sono ancora dichiarazioni ufficiali in merito, ma è chiaro che si investiga a 360 gradi. I racconti dei testimoni raccontano di un'esplosione avvenuta nell'ultimo vagone di questo treno metropolitano della District Line nella stazione di Parsons Green, southwest di Londra, verso le 8:20 del mattino. Il vagone, c'è stata questa esplosione, poi alcuni testimoni parlano come di una palla di fuoco, l'intero vagone avvolto dalle fiamme e ovviamente una fuga precipitosa, la calca per fuggire. Ci sarebbe una ventina di feriti, soprattutto di persone ustionate al volto. La gravità di queste ferite rimane tutta da verificare. Ovviamente sul posto sono intervenuti immediatamente la polizia, vigili del fuoco, le ambulanze, zona evacuata, stazione evacuata e chiusa, sospesa fra Skirt e Wimbledon, dunque i due centri principali all'interno dei quali ma che arrivano da vari testimoni. Sembra che a provocare questa esplosione sia stato un ordigno contenuto all'interno a sua volta contenuta all'interno di un di plastica bianca dentro una busta dei supermercati Lidl, una busta grande da supermercato. Questo sarebbe il contenitore esploso, andato poi che avrebbe causato l'esplosione, almeno secondo tutte le testimonianze, secondo tutte le ricostruzioni. Un'esplosione che appunto ha fatto ferite, ha creato chiaramente quanto chi l'ha voluta pensava sarebbe stata. Infatti, ad esempio, non sembra che il vagone stesso della metropolitana abbia avuto dei danni da questa esplosione stessa. Come dicevamo, nessun fuga in avanti, nessun parlare di terrorismo in questo momento da parte delle forze dell'ordine, che piuttosto hanno come priorità quella di recuperare un grande timore. Lo ricordiamo, Londra è stata colpita 4 volte prima dell'estate nel giro di 3 mesi da attentati terroristici di varia entità, di varia gravità e di varia natura, che chiaramente però hanno creato grande tensione e attenzione in città. Lo ricordiamo, 3 attentati di stampo
avenues to the detectives. So we already have counter-terror detectives at the stations leading up to the train. The train itself likes to have CCTV on it, so they've already got the option to view the CCTV off the train, speak to eyewitnesses. The device looks relatively intact, so it's a very, very quick process, or reasonably quick in other instances, to narrow down the suspect or suspects where they entered the train and where they exited the train. So we're already narrowing down the investigative possibilities.
And the CCTV, as you mentioned, quite a crucial part of the investigation. But how quickly can that be viewed and turned around and information gleaned from it?
Well, in cases like this, they're a lot quicker than other investigations. You actually got the time the train left Wimbledon, the time it pulled into certain stations. So there's only certain periods of time you have to then view the tape. We've also got eyewitness accounts. You can look at the CCTV from the train, so you may even be able to see the people or person that brought this device on. So you're just looking for one or more individuals entering stations at certain places. Only 5 options to get on this train, as I've said. So it does narrow down the doors that the investigators have got to open to start having a look at where these people came from, and narrows down as well how they got on this train. The only major terminus is at Wimbledon. So all the other stations on this line leading up to Parsons Green, there's only one station coming into it. There's only a couple of entrances and exits. So it limits the places they have to look for where the suspect or suspects entered the train.
And Graham, is it a possibility that the suspect could have simply walked off the train with any of the other passengers, been interviewed by police as a witness, and left the scene?
Yeah, that's also a possibility. It's I said before, it seems a strange place for this to have detonated, either partially or fully, because there's a limited avenue of escape for the suspects. If they've set the timer, they've then got to get off the train and leave with everybody else. There's only one exit route there. So it's a strange place for this to have either partially or fully detonated from the suspect's perspective, because they are limited their own escape opportunities. They've got to come out the same route as everybody else and go onto just one major road there, Parsons Green Lane. There's no other obvious avenues of escape. There's no other major train stations or train lines they can jump on and get away from the area. So this is part of the investigation that the detectives will be looking at.
OK, Graham, stay with us. We're going to get the latest now from London's Mayor Sadiq Khan. This is what's coming from City Hall.
Well, look, the terrorist attack this morning was an attempt by evil and cowardly individuals to kill, to injure and to disrupt our way of life. So now I want to pay tribute to the commuters on the tube, to the Transport for London staff and to the others who acted swiftly this morning. And thankfully, there aren't any serious injuries. Thankfully, there aren't any life-threatening injuries, but there are, I'm afraid, 18 people who've been taken to a number of hospitals across London. And I want to pay tribute to the police and security services who, as we speak, are following up various lines of inquiry to ensure those responsible for this evil and cowardly attack are caught.
Just heard from Margaret Early, the Met Commissioner, saying that this is a live incident. What would you say to that?
Well, look, the police and security services are following up various lines of inquiry. If anybody has any information at all, it's really important. You may think it's trivial, you may think it doesn't matter. Let the police be the judges of that. There's a special counter-terror hotline that's been set up. It's 0800 789 321. Please ring up that hotline. If it's an emergency, you can ring, of course, 999. But we need to make sure that the public, who are the eyes and ears of the police and security services, provide the police with the information they need. The focus today has to be apprehending and catching those responsible. And I'm confident the police and security services are following up all the lines of inquiry they can.
Okay, this is the 4th terror attack this year. Do you think the Met Police are overwhelmed?
The phrase used by counter-terror experts a few weeks ago was, this is not a spike, this is a shift. And we've seen a shift across major cities in Europe, whether it's Barcelona, whether it's Brussels, whether it's Paris, whether it's Rotterdam, whether it's Stockholm, whether it's Manchester. The terrorists have stepped up attempts to kill us, to injure us, to disrupt our way of life. And we've got to make sure we're alert, we're vigilant, but also we're calm over the next few hours, the next few days. Londoners will see an enhanced police presence. They will see an increased police presence on our public transport network and across London. We've got to be vigilant, we've got to be alarmed, we've got to be calm. But I say this, today may not be the day to make the case at the Cobra meeting, but I'm not going to resolve from saying what I've been saying for the last 16 months, which is that London needs more resources to keep our city safe. You know, since 2010, we've lost hundreds of millions of pounds from the police budget. We've had to reduce police staff. We've had to sell off police stations. We're having to make tough decisions now. It's simply not possible for a global city like London to carry on keeping our citizens, visitors and businesses safe if the government carries on making the cuts they've been making.
What would you say to Londoners today?
My message to Londoners is we should...
Well, we've heard there from Sadiq Khan, the Mayor of London. We know that he had that infamous spat with the President of the United States, Donald Trump, about the last terrorist attack when he called for people to stay calm. He has done the same this time round. We've also heard from Donald Trump in the last few minutes. The US President has tweeted another attack in London by a loser terrorist. These are sick and demented people who were in the sights of Scotland Yard. Must be proactive. So a tweet there from President Donald Trump. Not quite sure what he means by in the sights of Scotland Yard. It sounds that he is being somewhat critical. We can show you the latest pictures of Assistant Commissioner Mark Rowley, I believe, arriving at Downing Street. That Cobra meeting to start at 1 o'clock. Tamara Cohen is there for us. Tamara, take us through what will be happening.
Well, the Prime Minister arrived back at Downing Street around half an hour ago. She had been in her Maidenhead constituency because, of course, Parliament is now in recess. She is back. A policeman handed her some documents on her way in, and she is now being briefed by officials ahead of that meeting, which starts at around 1 o'clock. Cobra is a committee to bring together all government departments and agencies to make sure the response is coordinated. So the Home Secretary will be attending. The London Mayor, Sadiq Khan, who we just heard from, will also be there to be updated on the latest developments. The Prime Minister has put out a statement this morning when she heard about these attacks, saying, "My thoughts are with those affected at Parsons Green and the emergency services who are responding swiftly and bravely to a suspected terrorist incident." We've also had a statement from the Labour leader, Jeremy Corbyn, expressing his sympathies with those caught up in it. We will hear from the Prime Minister after the meeting is over. Downing Street sources I've spoken to stress that the investigation is at a very early stage, but we will be hearing from her after she's discussed it with her senior team. Of course, the Prime Minister's time in office has been very much blighted by terrorism. This is the 5th terror attack since she became Prime Minister a little over a year ago. And you may remember that after the London Bridge terror attacks during the election campaign, she made a speech saying that enough is enough and there has been too much tolerance of extremism. So we may hear similar language possibly today when we know more about this incident. Certainly that will be something the Prime Minister will be questioned about. So we expect to hear a bit more later today. I'm sure that ministers do not find Donald Trump's intervention particularly helpful, or his suggestion that the perpetrator was somehow in Scotland Yard's sites. When I asked them about it, they played it down and said that they're concentrating on preparing the Prime Minister for this meeting that's due to be held in the next half an hour.
Tamara, as you say, this is the 5th attack since Theresa May has been Prime Minister. Do you think that we might see a change in tact once she reports after that Cobra meeting? Might we hear something different today from the Prime Minister?
Well, so far her statement has just simply been to express sympathy with those affected, to thank the emergency services for their very swift response. I think it all rather depends on how much we find out during the course of the day about the perpetrator or perpetrators. Certainly during the London Bridge attack, when you remember, of course, the police shot dead 2 attackers on the bridge, more was known about the attackers straight away. and obviously coming just before the election, the Prime Minister made these comments about tolerance of extremism. Labour weighed in by attacking the government for not having enough police on the streets. There were lots of political responses to that attack. We saw a little bit of that from Sadiq Khan just now, actually, saying that hundreds of millions of pounds have been cut from police budgets. So it may be that there are political interventions both by the Prime Minister and by Labour, but that is probably for a lot later in the day when they know a bit more, because so far, as we've heard from the police officers so far, it sounds like there is still a lot to be clarified about exactly what took place, and those I've spoken to in Number 10 stress that this is at an early stage, and we expect there could be further meetings later in the day should any more developments emerge about this attack. So far quite a muted response, but it really does depend on how much we find out later on.
Tamara, remind us exactly who will be attending that Cobra meeting and potentially how long that is likely to go on for. And also if you can give us any insight as to exactly how that meeting will be conducted. What are the processes that they go through?
Well, the full cast list will be provided after the meeting, but they are Cobra meetings, which Cobra simply means Cabinet Briefing Room A. It's simply the name of the room where they take place, but it's the emergency response, all the relevant departments and government agencies. So you'd expect the Home Secretary would be there, probably several other senior Cabinet Ministers, someone from the Met Police, the London Mayor. They change, the cast list of these meetings changes every time depending on the incident and on who needs to be present. They in the past have lasted anything from around 45 minutes to over 2 hours, so it depends how much they need to be updated on from what's come out from the police and potentially the security services so far. The length of time really depends, but that's sort of around the time scale, and it gets going at around 1 o'clock. So we expect to hear from the Prime Minister at some point, probably mid-afternoon, with more from what was said at that meeting.
And you were saying that following on from Cobra, there might be a number of separate meetings afterwards taking place. Are those smaller meetings that then will now publish a plan of action?
I think you were just asking me about further meetings. I'm told that it really depends on what comes out from the investigation. When there have been fast-moving terror attacks in the past, I'm thinking perhaps of the Westminster attack, which was literally a couple of hundred yards from where I'm standing now in March of this year. As more information came out, there were further Cobra meetings that evening and the following day. So I think we can expect further Cobra meetings, and of course the relevant Cabinet Ministers will be having briefings with their own officials. The whole process is intended to make sure that all the key people are in the room at the same time and that they've all had the same briefing. But the meeting will be chaired by the Prime Minister, and we should get an update from her as soon as it's over, and it will be interesting to see what sort of tone, as you were saying, she takes, whether it's a very muted one of just sympathising with those affected, or whether it's something a lot stronger.
OK, Tamara, we'll of course be back to you for the updates from that meeting of Cobra, due to start at around 1 o'clock. I just want to show you the forensics van that has arrived on the scene at Parsons Green. We've seen a number of vehicles pass the cordon to move further down towards the station, which is on the left-hand side, just past the bridge there. The investigation obviously now turning to identifying exactly what the makeup of that device was. And with me is our Home Affairs correspondent, Mark White. And Mark, one key piece of information that had come through to you in recent times was the fact that there was a timer on this device.
Yes, and what that tells the authorities is that the bomber wasn't present when this device detonated here at Parsons Green. Attention, we understand now, is turned to the tube stations before Parsons Green. This was a London-bound District Line train. There are something like 5 stations from Wimbledon
the Prime Minister
here to Parsons Green.
Mid-afternoon,
so what we have is police activity now at those stations. They're checking
you were saying
CCTV,
that following on from
they're
Cobra, there
speaking
might
to
be
potential
a number of
eyewitnesses
separate
at the scene,
meetings
trying to determine whether the bomber or bombers, whoever it was that left that device on the floor of this tube carriage, which station they exited from. The reasonable assumption is it was a station or two before Parsons Green. So at these other tube stations now, there is a significant police presence as they try to, if you like, work their way back to determine where this suspect or suspects have gone. That is the priority now. These suspects or suspect is still at large. There may be a wider network at play. There may be other attacks that are planned here. So as a matter of urgency, we hear the police helicopters that are overhead. They're not just trained down here at this very active crime scene, but at other lines on the network as well. And that's why we saw armed police officers fanning out down the tracks to determine whether the suspect might have left that carriage. But the discovery of a timer has taken that sort of thinking in terms of where the suspect left further back down that district line route.
And the nature of the timer, obviously they wouldn't want a large amount of time to elapse before the device was detonated, so that perhaps narrows down as to how soon the suspect might have got onto the tube.
Similar bombings in the past where they have not been suicide bombings, but it's been a timed device that has been left. There's normally just a short period of time between the bomber leaving the train or whichever area they planted the bomb in and that bomb detonating for an obvious reason. They don't want that device to be discovered for people to evacuate that train and for there to be no casualties. They want to cause as many injuries and deaths as possible. So normally it's probably just 2 or 3 minutes before the bomb is due to detonate that the timer has been set for. Someone enters the train, puts it down, stands about for a bit and then heads off a station or two before. That's where the concentration of the urgent part of this investigation and trying to determine where the suspect or suspects are is now concentrated. As yet, no word on any arrests, and that is, of course, a real concern to the police.
OK, Mark, for the moment, thank you. Let's speak now to counter-terrorism expert Hamish de Brecon-Gordon. He's a former head of the British Army's Chemical Weapons Unit. Good afternoon to you. As you see it, with the background of your expertise, what now is the focus of this police investigation?
Well, what we don't know is a lot of information about the bomb itself, whether it was an incendiary device, in other words, to set fire to the carriage, or explosive. The modus operandi does seem to be classic sort of jihadi terrorism, focus on mass population on a transport network and create the terror as we've seen that it's done. I think it's been lucky here, dreadful for the 18 people injured, but had it gone off, the size of it, it could have been devastating. We're getting bits and pieces, as we've heard from your correspondent. Looks like a timer rather than a suicide bomber. I mean, I think there are some things that are a slight concern here. This was a fairly obvious device, and it's surprising that it wasn't picked up. Had this been in, say, Japan or South Korea or Singapore, where people are trained, the general public is trained and advised very regularly on this sort of thing, and that's perhaps, hopefully, what the government will be discussing this afternoon to better educate the public. This would have been picked up, but the terrorist, most likely jihadi, but we don't know, has now shown their latest or their next way to terrify us. So at least we can put in mitigation strategies to make it less likely in future.
I'm having a little difficulty hearing you here, but I think you were talking about being surprised about the device not being picked up. But how would that be the case when it was disguised in a very ordinary shopping bag?
Well, it's a large shopping bag. There was a big 20-litre plastic container within it, so it's quite a big device. And somebody getting onto a busy tube train around Parsons Green, presumably heading into the city, that is not a regular piece of equipment. And then, as it was a timing device set for 3 or 4 minutes, I agree, somebody would have got off and left it. And I think when we had the RA bombing campaign, the public were very aware of this sort of thing and probably would have reported it very quickly. So I think it's a business of re-educating the public. In the past, I think the government have rather not wanted to expose these sort of tight terror threats too much to worry the public. But actually, I think the public are far more aware and educated about these things, and we should give them credit for it so that they know what to look for. And in this case, had somebody picked it up and stopped the train and got off, then it would have been less effective. But I think the key thing is now that we need to move forward. I'm sure the police are doing all they can with MI6 and the security services to track down the bomber. That should not be too difficult to find. But then we need to make sure it doesn't happen again. I think educating the population is key. I also think regulation. This is probably the explosive could be a peroxide or an ammonium nitrate type thing, and which you can buy easily as you can with other toxic materials. And I think that's something we should focus on to make sure that there's regulation in place, that people can't buy these things unless they absolutely need them for their daily lives.
How more vigilant are you suggesting that the public be, though? I mean, I would suggest that seeing someone with a supermarket carrier bag, even with a white bucket, potentially, or a paint-size bucket, that might not necessarily strike a commuter as being suspicious.
No, I agree. We don't want to panic people. But the size of this and having looked at it, it appears to have some wires coming out and other bits and pieces. It just looks suspicious. And without panicking about it, these sort of things that are out of the ordinary, and it would be I'm sure CCTV will pick up these things. It's just being aware. I would suggest that is an unusual thing to be carrying on a train into the city at the rush hour on a Friday morning. So I think generally we have been reticent about talking too much about the methods that terrorists use, because there is a perception that it will overly frighten the public, and ridiculously some people suggest it will give terrorists other ideas. I think the sort of terror we're up against, and we all know that there is a severe threat, they have no limit to what they're prepared to do. We collectively, as we did during the RA bombing campaign, need to know what to look for and not be afraid to step forward and take action and alert the authorities if that is the case. It might well not be here, but I think we've just lost that collective awareness, and the government needs to give more responsibility to the public, because 99.99% of them want to see this terrorism defeated. And we're in it collectively, and collectively we can overcome it. But if we don't give people all the information they require, it's going to be that much more difficult.
OK, Hamish de Bretton-Gordon, counter-terrorism expert, thank you very much for speaking to us. Well, a number of people caught up, obviously, in this morning's drama. Let's hear from a witness that was on that tube.
The station was too small to contain all the people that were on the train from all the other stations that had got on. They all were trying to get off, and it was just this stampede, this human crush of people on the stairs. And I was thinking, someone's broken a leg, this is awful. I was so happy to be where I was in this little, keeping myself protected. There's lots of layers of people underneath me just physically being trampled on.
But to be clear, you were boarding the train?
I had boarded the train. 5 seconds later, I had to get off. So I walked into Parsons Green, I got on the train, I ran off.
And you didn't hear anything?
Nothing. I didn't hear anything, just screaming.
So obviously you saw people being injured in the stampede.
Yeah.
Could you see anyone who had been injured in the explosion?
No, because I was not looking back. I just looked forward, as did everyone. There was no eye contact. It's typical Londoners. We were all a bit confused. I was trying to find one of the shoes that came off my feet as I was eventually able to come out. I just found the whole thing was so surreal. I didn't see an explosion. I saw a woman having her head covered in water, so I thought, oh, acid. That was my first thought, because there wasn't any noises. But now I've read that it was a small explosion with a device that someone took onto the train, which is awful, because this is such a lovely part of London, and I've always felt so safe here.
Did you see anyone injured?
Yes, the little boy that smashed his face into the steps that was sort of underneath me to my left. He was in his school uniform, tiny little thing, maybe 8 years old, and everyone was very aware of him because he was screaming and screaming. So I thought maybe he'd broken something. There was a lady underneath me that was shouting, "I'm pregnant, I'm pregnant," but as everyone was piling on top. Yeah.
So it was really a stampede?
Major stampede, yeah. But people were we were all very carefully trying not to put weight on each other. It was quite touching in that way, because I was like leaning completely on the rail, trying not to put any of my weight on anyone and keeping my feet on the ground, which was hard when you're being swept off your feet by lots of people coming into the side of you and on the top of you. No, and then we were all just outside just thinking, what on earth has just happened?
What about the staff at the station and then the emergency services? How did they all handle it?
The emergency services were there immediately. As I left the station, ambulances and police were turning up. The staff were actually shouting at us to get back. So the people at the bottom of the stairs that were really being crushed, I was in the middle, they were sort of towards the bottom with all that weight. They were shouting at us, get back, and I assume now that was for the safety of those at the bottom. But the staff didn't know, they had no idea, they were just as shocked as we were. They had no idea.
No.
Well, one of the witnesses caught up in this morning's drama, as you heard there. Very many others giving us their accounts. We have now got a statement from the Home Secretary, Amber Rudd, in which she says, once more, people going about their everyday lives have been targeted in a callous and indiscriminate way. My thoughts are with all those injured and affected. The police and emergency services were quickly on the scene, and I would like to pay tribute again to their professionalism and tireless commitment. I am receiving regular updates on what is an ongoing and active investigation. I would urge Londoners to remain alert and assist the police and emergency services as much as they can. So that the official latest statement in from the Home Secretary, Amber Rudd, commenting on how this terrorist attack has been handled and really commending those involved in dealing with the aftermath. Well, many people, as I say, involved this morning travelling in to London on the tube when that device was detonated and exploded at Parsons Green. Let's listen to a chap called Charlie, who I spoke to a little earlier on. He was joined, I think, by his partner. But let's listen to how he described what happened this morning.
So we get on Parsons Green every day. We commute to the City of London, so it's about a 40-minute journey. We go on the end of the train. We made that decision a number of years ago after the London terrorist attacks to always get on the end, because we always think it's ironically the safest place. Literally stepped on the tube, and probably within about 3 or 4 seconds heard a loud explosion go off. Turned around, because I was facing that way, and saw this orange taking the whole of the tube up, coming towards us very fast, the speed of sound coming towards us, a bit like you see on the sort of movies, just engulfing the whole tube, and people sort of being absorbed into that. I hope those people are okay. Everyone was in total shock, screaming, shouting. The doors had shut just by that point, and they suddenly opened to allow everyone off. I assume that's maybe a mechanism of the tube or something. And we just panicked. I heard a lot of people went down the stairs. Because we're at the end of the tube, we managed to, we were compacted with people against the fencing, but we managed to release ourselves, my girlfriend is over there, and jump over the fence and run down the track as fast as we could, just getting away. My immediate thoughts was, oh my god, there's a gunman or something else going to happen. You just don't know, like your whole life flashes in front of you. Made it probably about 200 yards or something, if not further, down the track. Didn't look back once, slipped into the hedging to get away from any scene, someone maybe running down, and stayed there for a couple of minutes. It was only then until I heard the first siren go, which would have been about 3.5, 4 minutes after the initial attack happened. So great response by emergency services. Did I walk up the hedgerow and look, and I saw steam coming out the top of the tube. People still on the platform, panicking, not knowing, couldn't get off the tube. It's quite hard. The railings are quite high, and there's either the stairs, then spiky railings, and then a little area you can get off down the platform. So everyone was pinned back. Luckily, we managed to get out. And then it was only then, when I saw police on the platform, did we make our way on the other side of the track, because there's no way to get out of the tube line, back to the platform, where we were stopped by an armed guard. He said stop, assessed us, making sure we were a threat, and then one of his colleagues came and escorted us off. We were one of the last people off the out of the incident, to which we walked up Parsons Green Lane back to where we live.
with Charlie there describing what happened this morning. Interestingly, he spoke about having a plan of action should there be a terrorist attack, and his way of being prepared was to be in the last carriage. Quite an ordeal for him. He was quite shaken up when I spoke to him a little earlier on. Well, let's now speak to Mark White, our Home Affairs correspondent. Mark, just thinking about now what the terror threat level is. We are at severe at the moment. Is there any chance that that might be raised?
There's every chance it could be raised, yes. The Joint Terrorism Analysis Centre, JTAC, is the body that determines, independent of government, what the threat level should be at. It's been critical for a while. It went up during the recent terrorist attacks. It's been severe for a while, I should say. It went up to critical for a brief period while they were very concerned about the possibility of follow-on attacks. Given the fact that we don't have, at the moment, as far as we know, a suspect or suspects who have been arrested in connection with this bomb, there will be, of course, very real concern about the potential for follow-on attacks. I was out in Barcelona covering the attacks there. The van driver ploughed into that crowd and then ran off, but that left him free to potentially carry out other attacks. That nation was on high alert for days until he was finally cornered and shot by armed police outside Barcelona. So you have a potential situation of at least one person still on the loose who's planned to bomb up that tube carriage in Barcelona, covering the attacks there. The van driver ploughed into that crowd and then or that was the intention, was to create some kind of flash fireball anyway, but